Wow, we're going to go a wonderful day today. Okay, next couple of videos are going to be from subscribers and asking questions. Two of them. One's going to be on how to estimate the mental math of how much it's going to cost you to do a house, okay? And breaking it down so that you can get that mental math happening in your head. The other one is going to be how to maximize your AAC block so you don't have a lot of wastage. I'm not sure that I showed enough video, especially at the end there, how much wastage we had. And I'll bet you dollars to donuts, we only had maybe 2 equivalent blocks that by the time we sliced them all up were waste. Most were at least 20 or bigger. Straight out of the gate, you got to remember that they are a metric country. So just start getting used to your 10 times tables. It's much, much easier. Now I'm going to have a series of little charts up on the screen. So if you want to do screenshots as you go, then you can crop out the top of my head or wherever it is. They're quite wide. So anyway, you'll see in a second here. But to get right into it, number 4. Number 4 is an imperial version of how they say it rather than saying inches and feet. So number 4 is 4-inch. Number 6 is 6-inch. Number 8 is, you got her. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're hearing them talk about number 4 block, which is nice. It's a 10 centimeter block, which means that 16 or 6, number 6 is going to be 15 centimeters. Okay, so there's some basics out of the way. Now, the other basic is that AAC doesn't come tight to your concrete wall. So you've got to remember that. So the gap that you want overall when you're doing your wall-to-wall calculation is 2 to 2.5 max centimeter gap over the whole thing. Again, I don't want to get into inches because they do this thing of number 1, number 2, number 1.5. Don't get into that. Just stick in the centimeter world. It's easier. Basically, you do not want to go over 1 inch on your overall gap. Overall, guys, got to drive that home. Not on each end, not on the wall, and then this pillar has got a 1 inch and the other end has got 1 inch. No, the overall is 2 to 2.5 over the whole length. So 1.25 would be 1/2 inch. So now let's get into maximizing your AAC. Now this comes down to working with those classic 60 centimeter. Everything in the AAC world is 60. Whether it's a panel, it's 60. If it's a block, it's 60. It doesn't matter whether it's Starkin at 20 high or Light Strong at 30 high or Dr. J at 60 high. They're all 60 wide. So start from there. Your ceiling doesn't really matter too much because you're going to put a ceiling in that's going to be just a little bit below your AAC, so you've got a gap in there anyway. So don't worry too much about that spacing up there, okay? To start with. You need to decide whether you want an 8-foot ceiling on the inside, 8.5-foot ceiling, or 9. Our math worked out that it was just over 9 feet, and so then we slid it in there. Now, you won't know until you pour your slab and all of that type of thing. And let me slide this in. If there's one tool I wish we'd have brought, and Ernest did bring one, so he remembered, and that is a laser level, guys. One of these ones that goes back and forth. So you can position it in a corner, and then it will just keep shooting, okay? Bring a laser level with you guys so that no matter where it shoots, you can see that red line across the room or snagging each of the pillars out there, okay? Very handy to do your bull float and your screeding and all of that type of thing. So here's the Goldilocks for your, say, your maximum length walls, okay? Now, again, here's the chart. It's, it's 60, it's, 120 and so on. Now, I made the decision that the maximum that we were going to do is a 30 cut. Okay, and that's where that 2 to 2.5 centimeter wiggle comes in, because every time you cut the block, make sure the guys are cutting it in the middle of the 30 line. Yes, you're going to have a little wastage here and a little wastage there. Put that up against your concrete because or your pillar, because you have to fill in there anyway. Make sense? You're going to use, as we did, expansion foam. You're going to cut the expansion foam back a little bit, and then you're going to put your finishing into that gap, and then do multiple finishes over the whole wall after that's done. Okay, so, and as you know, we did our AAC so the pillars did not stick into the house. So from our perspective, that makes it easier. However, I will say this, the likelihood of a hairline feather crack coming down there is probably there, okay? But probably no different than drywall. You know, if you're like me, you're gonna repaint every 3 to 4 years, okay? So that is gonna take care of your problem, and if it's a little bit bigger, you're gonna take care of it. Okay, bathrooms. This gets interesting because in our case, we had to do that interlacing on those 2 outside or 3 outside walls that weren't tied up to a pillar. So you're going to have to add your number 4 or your 10 centimeter thickness to whatever length that you're doing. So keep that in mind when you're doing your math on your AAC block. So there you go, guys. These are kind of the Goldilocks numbers that you want to work with. It really does keep your wastage down quite a bit. Of course, handling of the block is important. I don't know if you ever did this with your kids, but this is how you hold a pop. Your baby finger goes at the bottom so that it doesn't slip through because the pop is sweating, right? Believe it or not, I said to all the crew, when you carry a block, your baby finger goes underneath. I don't want any blocks slipping and falling, chipping out a corner or whatever. Or worst case, hit something just right and it splits in half. Okay. Yeah, I spent a lot of time on that side of it, guys. And like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I think overall we only had about 2 blocks of total wastage. Sorry, I think my camera just gapped there. I don't think there was a situation where we had to cut laterally. I'm really scrambling in my head whether we ever had to, and I don't think so. I just worked the ceiling out so that we came down from where the gap was going to be at the ceiling to the AAC, or sorry, to the tie beam to the AAC. There was a gap there, and all I wanted to do was make my ceiling level below that. So then you're going to go up, depending on whether you've got a 20, 30, or 60 block high, and then do your calculation going up. If you're going to do one of these step down ceilings like they like to do in the Philippines, where they, you know, do a border all the way around and lights up inside that you can never get to fix. The older you get, the more you want to be on ladders, right? Okay, so I think that might help you with some of your design work, guys. I know it might be a little bit weird, but when you start getting down into taking a 60 block and cutting it by 20s, you know. Now, as one final note, the saw you buy. If you buy a street saw there, even at City Hardware, Wilcon, or any of these places, they're pretty flimsy, okay? They're meant for wood, even at a crosscut saw, right? Get the saw from the person supplying your AAC, okay? It is a much more rigid saw, and anybody out there will sharpen it. They'll look at it, they'll wonder what the heck it is because it's so stiff. All I kept saying to them is, it's a crosscut. File it down, guys. And, you know, I could have done that on my own, but for the amount of money that they charge. We did have a backup saw in case we got to that point where our local guy wasn't doing filing that day, and he wasn't going to be doing it for another 3 days. Yes, we had a backup saw. But it does tend to do this or start going at an angle across the block. And so, you know, this is one time where you want the guys to mark all the way around with the line and just keep going slow. You know, get it all the way down and through. Okay guys, that's a wrap on this one. Stay tuned for the mental math one. Now, I'm kind of used to doing it, but I think you can kind of get an idea of where I'm going to go with this on an AAC versus wall build. Later, kids.